Hey everyone, in this video we're going to add some additional controls and new functionality to the player. So we're going to add a couple controls that keeps your player from going off the screen. Also, we're going to add a new jump ability and we'll probably check for collision detection with the obstacles. So I'm going to quickly run this so I can show you the two problems. We already mentioned one, and that is you do a lane change, and then if you do another lane change in the same direction, there's nothing preventing you from going outside of the area. Second problem, if you're doing a lane change and then you initiate a lane change in the opposite direction while the first lane change is still going on, it breaks the system. So if I do A and then D, you can see now I'm not in the right place. By the way, that only happens for opposing lane changes. If you do another lane change in the same direction, there's no negative impact. I hit A rapidly there, and we can see down here, it's still exactly at -1. And we'll do it one more time. I hit D a couple times. I hit D a couple times. So double, triple tap in the same direction doesn't break anything, but opposing directions do. So let's go over to our scripts. I'm using the running dude script, and we're just going to put in private string lane change. And we'll default it to no. So again, this denotes what type of variable it is. It's a string, and this means absolutely nothing to the system itself. It's meant to be meaningful to you, what you're using this variable for. Okay? So we're going to use this to track, I should say, whether or not we are in the middle of a lane change. So for get key A, we're going to say lane change has been updated to yes. And then we can just copy and paste this. And that lane change has been updated to yes. So when you press a key, it updates lane change to yes. And down here, when you're no longer moving, we can reset lane change back to no, because now it's safe to move again. But we now need to check for that variable. So remember, whole thing for an if statement has to be surrounded by parentheses, double ampersand, and then lane change equals no. In other words, we were before just saying if this key is pressed, go ahead and do the lane change. Now we're saying if this variable is set to no and the key is pressed, okay, now you can do the lane change. And then we'll just rinse and repeat. And it really should be that easy. So again, when the button is pressed, we set this to lane change is yes. It gets reset to no when the lane change is done, and we now check for the status, the value of that variable before we initiate the lane change. So if I haven't made any mistakes, that takes care of that problem, but we will run it, of course, just to be safe. So I'm going to press A and then D, just fine. I'm going to press D and then A, just fine. Let's go to the other side. A and then D, just fine. D and then A. Yep, took care of it. So now we need to add the second control, and that is preventing you from moving outside of the playable area. For that one, we should just be able to look at the X position, because as we've seen, this is indeed abiding by those exact numbers, that no matter how many times we change lanes, it rests at either 0, 1, or -1. So what we can do, so pressing A moves you to the left. So we will let you move to the left as long as your position is not less than, we'll say, -0.9, just to be safe. So we need to add in here another ampersand, double, another set of parentheses, and we're going to type transform dot position. So again, if there's nothing before transform dot position, then this is returning the value of the object the script is attached to. If transform dot position dot x is if it's greater than negative 0.9, which it would be if it's in the center or right lane, but if it's in the left lane, it would be -1, and therefore it would not be greater than that. And then I believe we could just say as long as it's less than 0.9 positive. It's another thing working with 3 lanes, it gives you nice symmetry. You have a center, then 2 outer points, and the 2 outer points, they have the same absolute value. So as long as this is less than 0.9, then go ahead and do another lane change. I think that should do it. Let's save it. Okay, I'm hitting A and it's not moving over. Yep, hitting D, it's not moving over. Now we'll just kind of rapidly push either direction, and this is the true test if just banging on the keys breaks anything. So I probably just hit the keys about 30 or 40 times, and we are still right on the lanes like we should be. So just like that, we added the controls that keeps them within the player, the lanes that they should be within the playing field. Now, to make the playable character jump, we simply have to do a modification of what we've already been doing. So we're using a key press to add velocity to the x-axis. Okay, so now we just use a key press to add velocity to the y-axis, so they jump up in the air. So we'll go back to our running dude script, and what we'll do within the update section, we are going to add another input statement. So if input, remember get key, not get key down. Get key down is if you're looking for a rapid fire situation. And I believe it's just the word space in lowercase. We'll use the space button. We're not going to try to put these controls into place at first. We just want to make sure that we can make them jump. So if the space key is pressed, we want to add velocity. So I'm actually even going to copy this, again, out of laziness and to reiterate that we're not reinventing the wheel here. We're really just repurposing functionality that we've already looked at. Okay, but in this case, we don't want it to be the the x-axis. We don't want that to be changed. We want the y-axis, and it needs to be positive because it's moving in an upwards direction. And we'll see if that's the appropriate velocity. That is going to be, again, game balance. Depending how fast objects are moving will depend on how quickly you want your character to jump, that kind of thing, as well as how long you want them to jump. Do you want to give them a lot of margin error, or do you or not? So what we do, so IE numerator, we'll call this stop jump. And yield return new, wait 4 seconds. Now, as far as how long they should jump, I'm just going to put it at 1 second. And again, this is a game balance issue, so this is just to make sure that it's working correctly. Now, we already determined that velocity is if a unit of 1, a measurement of 1, is 1 block per second. So that means I'm going to go vertically 2 blocks if I wait 1 second, which means I then need to reverse this so they come back to the ground. We wouldn't have to do that if we were using gravity, but like I said, it was a design decision to not use gravity. So that means after we've waited our second, we will just take this, make it a -2, and now we add a second delay. And set this to 0. So in other words, we jumped at a rate of 2 for 1 second. Therefore, to bring us back to the exact same position, we need to descend at the opposite rate for the same amount of time, and that should bring us back exactly where we want to be. And now we just need to call this coroutine because, as I've mentioned before, a coroutine never occurs on its own. It has to be called. So we do start coroutine, parenthesis, stop jump, also with its parentheses. And let's see if this works. So we jump. Well, he's definitely jumping too high, that's for one thing. But as we said, though, the angle also makes it a little bit wrong because the angle probably should be a little bit more behind him, but that's not a problem with the jump itself. So I would say that he's probably jumping for too long of a period of time. So we said that single blocks are really the only thing you should be able to jump over. So you want to give some margin of error. So let you jump like, say, 1.5 blocks. So if you're happy with the speed of the jump, then that means you would have to reduce the duration. So let's say we change this to 0.75, and then you drop in an F because it is a decimal. Again, I think the jump would look better if the camera wasn't so directly above them. But this, technically, you should not be able to get over, and we can't really tell because of the angle, but it does look like he's clearing them. So we're going to have to make sure that for the blocks that are 2 blocks high, that they really do reach into that second block so they can't jump over them. Again, we can fix that going forward. Now let's put in the control to prevent jumping while you're in mid-jump already. So we're going to, at the top, add private string mid-jump, and it should default to N. No, they're not mid-jumping. And then when you press space to jump, similar to changing this, we're going to change mid-jump to Y. And then the mid-jump should be set back to no once you've landed. Now let's just go ahead and check for that mid-jump. Remember, double equals. that should do it. So I'm going to rapidly press jump. No problem. So now what we can do, we can start looking at collision detection. So we want to make sure that you can actually jump over items. So we already added colliders. So we just have to check what you're colliding with. So what we're going to do, we're going to add what's known as a tag. Add that same tag to all the obstacles. And then when we detect a collision, if it's with an object that has that tab, then it's a game over status. Because typically games like this, one hit and you're done unless you have something that revives you, but that would be for a later video. So what we're going to do is up here, when you have any object selected in the inspector, it's selected in the hierarchy, and you come here to the inspector, you can create a tag. So even though this says add tag, you're not adding the tag to this object. This is just creating the tag. So list is empty. We're going to create a tag, and we'll call it obstacle. Let me save it. Now if we come back to our prefab, we can now start applying this. See, obstacle, cart, obstacle, crate, obstacle, double crate, obstacle. We don't want this to be an obstacle because we don't want collisions with the terrain to be creating a problem. So now all we have to do is check to see if we've collided with that obstacle. So what we need to do right now, we don't have a collider. So let's add a collider to our game object for the running dude. So physics, and we'll just use a box collider. If you're doing this a really technical way, you would make sure that every single part had its own collider, but that's an awful lot of busy work for something that is really just meant to be a tutorial. I didn't realize that he's actually too low. Not sure when that happened. So anyways, I'm just going to take this box and make it his approximate shape. You might want to give them a little bit of benefit of the doubt and make it a little bit smaller than him. But like I said, the proper way is that while this guy is being assembled, each piece would really have its own collider. But as long as you've got the approximate size for a game like this, that's fine. Players tend to like a little bit of margin of error anyways. And this automatically went out to the sides of like the arms, so you need to pull those in because his arms will be in front of him. And for purposes of testing, this is sufficient. So what we're going to do, we're going to check to see for a collision now. And actually, let's make that a trigger. So back to the running dude script. We're now going to look for on trigger enter if other, and by other it's referring to this. So what this is saying, there's a collision with another object. So this is the word that's being used to reference that object. So if I change this, our name, I'd have to change that. So say I call this thing, then this would have to be thing. But we'll stick with other because it's calling out the fact that you're looking for the other object involved with the collision. You're not looking at the object the script is attached to, which is the running dude. You're looking at the other object. So it's useful verbiage. So if other.tag equals equals obstacle. Don't really have a game over status, so what we'll just do is debug.log and we'll have word ouch. Which reminds me, we really need to shut off the other one since we don't need that at the moment. And that's right here, actually. We'll just remark it out. So this one, so down here in the debug log, we should see ouch. Perfect. Just make sure there isn't any overlap between the lanes. So like if I'm next to it, it shouldn't say ouch. It's fine, but this should say ouch, and it did. So okay, we have our collision detection in place. So let's now look at jumping. So I actually didn't need to stop it. So we'll jump. Did not say ouch. Did say ouch there. And it looks like we do have a glitch due to a combination of jumping and lane changing, so that shouldn't be too much of a surprise. So basically, what happens is that with the jump, you're saying move vertically but don't move horizontally. So with the lane change, you're saying don't move vertically or horizontally. So basically, you're overwriting each other. So that's why I said at a certain point, we're going to try to get rid of all these redundant rigid body statements and try to just have one check per frame. And what would happen is rather than having constants like this that can contradict each other, you would use variables. So basically what we could do for now, we're going to leave it because, like I said, the only way, I was thinking about changing that in this video. For now, we're not going to because the only way to do it is to uproot the constants with variables. And I think that's really a tutorial in itself. So for now, just put a pin in it. Know that if you're trying to jump and lane change at the same time, it's a problem. So you could either just prevent that from happening. In other words, you could say you cannot jump and lane change at the same time. So in other words, you would say mid-jump. So we're checking to see if you're jumping. If mid-jump is set to no, okay, but also if lane change is set to no. Same thing up here. You're saying if lane change is no, but also check to see if jump is no. So in other words, they are mutually exclusive functions. You can jump or you can lane change, but you can't lane change and jump. So if you want, we can do that. We can restrict the other movement until we can get around to doing the uprooting. Because like I said, when you start switching to variables, that in itself doesn't really add any new functionality, but it makes your entire project more scalable. So all I did for the 2 lane changes, I'm also checking to see if you're jumping. For the 1 jump, I'm also looking to see if it's a lane change. So in other words, again, mutually exclusive. You can no longer jump and change lane at the same time. So we'll do that for now. But again, in your game, if you decide that you want them to jump and do a lane change, that's really not doable until we've uprooted the constants with variables. And I really wanted to combine that with like a difficulty slider because that's one of the reasons why you would do that. All right, so let's run this. And if that took care of that glitch, I think that should do it for this video. So let's try to do a jump and a lane change. Let's do a lane change and a jump. Perfect. So jumping, can't do lane change. Lane change can't do jumping. So just like that, we put a band-aid on it. But again, in your final game, you might decide that you want them to jump and lane change, and we'll have the variables to do that in a couple more episodes. So we've added the collision detection. The reason why I'm only having debug log is because we really don't have an end game state. We don't have the ability to purchase an item and say, okay, you've been revived, or the ability to have like an end game where it says, here's your scores, here's your tally. So for now, we'll probably just leave it like that. And in the next video, we'll work on adding ramps where you can actually climb on top of things. And I think that should do it. I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions or requests, put them in the comments field, and enjoy the rest of your day.